This is almost an unusual year for Republicans. Typically, what happens on the Republican side is that you already know going into the election cycle who is going to be the likely nominee, because that's the candidate who was the runner-up in the prior session. If you go back to Gerald Ford in 1976, the runner-up was Ronald Reagan, and then in 1980 the runner-up was George H.W. Bush, and so on, with very rare exceptions. I've heard it described as it's like running for being the president of the Rotary Club, where you first start out as the chair of the speakers, and then you're the first vice president, and 3 or 4 years later you end up as the president. You just have to work your way up the ladder. This year it's unusual. It's fairly wide open. If you followed the traditional betting, Sarah Palin, as having been the vice presidential nominee, should be the obvious candidate for the Democrats. But Sarah Palin is Sarah Palin. Who knows what her agenda is? It's other than to try to keep elbowing herself to the front of the parade so she gets plenty of media. But we'll see where she goes. Mitt Romney comes in as probably the senior figure, the grown-up in the room, so to speak, so far. He has done certainly very well in early polling. He is clearly the front runner in New Hampshire. A lot of that is the glow from Massachusetts, so he'll start in a fairly strong position. But Mitt Romney also brings with him perhaps more baggage than most early front runners do, and so the question about whether first and foremost he can explain how the Romney Care bill in Massachusetts that provided for medical care for people in Massachusetts, that is, at least in its major points, almost identical to what is dismissively called Obamacare, how he's going to be able to work through that with the conservative Republican electorate is a major issue for him. You look down the rest of the list, and there are some familiar names that are there. Of course, to have Newt Gingrich reappear after wandering in the desert, so to speak, for maybe a dozen years is interesting. He will bring certainly some interesting moments to the debate. But some of the others, the new faces could catch on. Tim Pawlenty, the former governor of Wisconsin, has been working very hard and could fill an interesting role out there. John Huntsman, former governor of Utah, but served at least 2 years as U.S. ambassador to China under President Obama. He's interesting in many ways and could be the fresh face if the Republican Party decides to go in that direction. A bit of an unknown, though, for I think a lot of the party to go to. An interesting candidate who is emerging in New Hampshire is Herman Cain, the former president of the Godfather's Pizza chain, but who had a rather, I think, successful career as a CEO and chief executive, and now probably known better for talk radio. That seems to be a place where a lot of candidates are coming from lately, and so he has been working very hard up in New Hampshire. So it's I think the field is broad. It's I think a little bit early to know if we're going to end up with any more entries. I suspect that at least the big names that we already know are in there, with the possible exception of Sarah Palin. I'd be surprised if she put off her little game much longer than she has now. We'll see where she goes.